They say blood is thicker than water, but on a cold
Keep
Tuesday
moving, we're
night in
almost to the
October,
OR.
in a nowhere town tucked between the mountains in the rain, a 17-year-old boy proved that courage is thicker than both. He lay bleeding on the floor of a roadside diner, his life draining out of him in a dark river across the linoleum, because he stepped in front of a girl he had never met before. He did not know her name, he did not know her story, and he certainly did not know that the phone call she made with trembling, blood-slicked hands was not to the police. It was to her father. And by the time the sun crested the ridge over the quiet town of Coppervale, Oregon, the police were the least of the town's worries. Because the horizon was not glowing with sunlight, it was glowing with chrome. 200 Iron Saints were coming, and they were not coming to visit. They were coming for war. But before the thunder, before the army of leather and steel descended on a town that had never seen anything louder than a 4th of July parade, there was a girl, and she was running. Not running from danger, not yet. She was running from herself. Wren Calloway was 16 years old, and she had been on the road for 3 weeks. 3 weeks since she had walked out of a life most people would kill for, and most people would never understand. Her father was rich, powerful, feared in 11 states, and respected in all 50. He commanded an army of men who would lay down their lives at a single word from his mouth. He had given Wren everything a girl could want. Everything except a choice. Wren did not want the leather. She did not want the clubhouse. She did not want the armed escorts to school the whispered conversations that stopped when she walked into a room the way grown men twice her size would avert their eyes when she passed. She did not want to be a princess in a kingdom built on gasoline and silence. So she left. She packed a bag, emptied her savings account of $1,400, and caught a Greyhound out of Reno at 4 in the morning while her father slept. She ditched her phone in a trash can in Sacramento. She cut her hair short in a gas station bathroom in Medford. She was going to disappear. She was going to become nobody. But the road had other plans. 3 weeks of cheap motels, cold bus stations, and meals made of vending machine crackers had turned $1,400 into $23. Her clothes smelled like diesel and stale coffee. She had blisters on her feet from boots that were never made for walking. And then, at a Greyhound stop in Portland, she made a mistake that would change everything. She grabbed the wrong bag. It was a simple error. The bags looked identical. Black nylon duffel, no name tag. She slung it over her shoulder and walked off the bus without a second thought. It was not until she was 2 hours south, sitting in the back of a pickup truck, she had hitched a ride in, that she unzipped it and found what was inside. It was not her clothes. It was not her toothbrush and her dog-eared copy of East of Eden. Inside were bundles of cash, thousands of dollars wrapped tight in rubber bands. And beneath the cash, a small black flash drive in a plastic case taped to the lining of the bag. Wren stared at it. Her hands began to shake. She knew with the instinct of a girl who had grown up in the shadow of the outlaw world that she was holding something that could get her killed. She did not plug in the flash drive. She did not count the money. She zipped the bag shut and got out of the truck at the next stop, a gas station in the middle of nowhere. She was going to leave the bag. She was going to walk away. But she could not. Because if someone was looking for this bag, they would trace her. They would find the Greyhound manifest. They would find the pickup driver. And they would find her. The only way to stay safe was to keep moving and figure out what she was carrying so she could figure out how to give it back without ending up in a shallow grave. That was how Wren Calloway ended up in Coppervale, Oregon at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night with a flat tire, $23, a stolen bag full of secrets, and absolutely no one in the world to call. Coppervale was the kind of town that existed in the margins. It sat in a valley between 2 ridges of the Cascade foothills, surrounded by dense Douglas fir forests that pressed in on all sides like dark green walls. The main street was 4 blocks long. There was a hardware store, a barber shop, a church, and a bar called the Rusty Nail that closed at 10 on weeknights. The population sign at the edge of town read 2,847, but that was optimistic. Half the houses on the back roads had been empty since the mill closed in 2003. The most exciting thing to happen in Coppervale in recent memory was the high school football team making the state quarterfinals 2 years ago. They lost by 31 points, but the town still talked about it like it was the moon landing. Wren's sedan, a $1,500 beater she had bought with cash in Eugene, had blown a tire on Route 9 coming into town. She had limped it into the parking lot of the only place with lights still on. A neon sign buzzed in the rain. Pop's Diner, 24 hours. The H in hours was burned out, giving the sign a lopsided, tired look that matched the building perfectly. She sat in the car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. The rain was coming down hard now, drumming on the roof, streaking the windshield. Through the smeared glass, she could see the warm yellow glow of the diner interior. A figure moved behind the counter. One customer sat in a booth near the window, an old man with white hair working on a piece of pie. Wren looked at the bag on the passenger seat. She looked at the flat tire. She looked at the $23 in her wallet. Then she pulled the hood of her oversized leather jacket over her head, grabbed the bag, and walked into the diner. The bell above the door chimed with a tired little jingle. The smell hit her first. Burnt coffee, industrial cleaner, and the faint, permanent ghost of bacon grease that had seeped into the walls over decades. The floor was checkered black and white, scuffed and stained. The booths were red vinyl cracked with age. A jukebox sat in the corner, unplugged, gathering dust. Behind the counter stood a boy. He was about her age, maybe a year older. Tall and thin, with shaggy brown hair that fell over his eyes like a curtain he was hiding behind. He wore a stained white apron over a flannel shirt, and he was wiping down the counter with a rag that looked like it needed its own cleaning. His name tag said Micah. Micah Dawson did not look up immediately when the door chimed. He was used to the sound. The occasional trucker, the odd insomniac, the rare lost traveler who wandered in off the interstate. They came, they ordered coffee, they left. Nobody stayed in Coppervale on purpose. But when he did look up, something made him pause. The girl who had walked in was not a trucker. She was not a lost tourist. She was young, maybe 16, with short, dark hair that looked like it had been cut in a hurry. She wore a leather jacket that was at least 2 sizes too big for her battered combat boots, and she carried a black duffel bag slung over one shoulder like it weighed 100 pounds. But it was her eyes that stopped him. They were a sharp storm cloud blue, and they moved across the room with a precision that was almost military. She scanned the corners, the exits, the old man in the booth. She clocked everything in 2 seconds flat. Wren slid into a booth near the back, positioning herself so she could see both the front door and the hallway to the restrooms. She set the bag on the seat beside her, one hand resting on it. She did not take off her jacket. Micah walked over with a menu and a glass of water. The menu was laminated and sticky. "What can I get you, Badem?" "Black coffee," Wren said. Her voice was steady but quiet. "And fries if you have them." "We always have fries," Micah said. He paused. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the parking lot through the window, watching the rain. Rough night. It was the most he had said to a customer in weeks. He was not sure why he said it. Maybe because she looked the way he felt most days. Alone, tired, and a long way from anywhere that mattered. Wren looked up at him. For a second, something shifted behind those guarded eyes. A flicker of surprise, maybe? Or recognition. The recognition of one invisible person seeing another. "Something like that," she said. "Just passing through." She was not just passing through. Micah could see the flat tire from the window. But he did not push it. He went back to the counter, poured her coffee, and dropped a basket of fries in the oil. The old man in the corner, a retired postal worker named Pemberton, who came in every Tuesday for cherry pie and silence, turned a page of his newspaper and paid no attention to anything. For a few minutes, the diner existed in its usual state of quiet suspension. Rain on the roof, hum of the refrigerator, sizzle of the fryer. Micah brought Wren her coffee and fries. She wrapped both hands around the mug like she was trying to absorb the warmth through her skin. "Your tire's flat," Micah said, setting down the fries. "I know. I've got a jack in the back. I can take a look when my shift is over if you want." Wren looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He was skinny, a little awkward, with kind eyes behind all that hair. He was offering to help a stranger at midnight in the rain because he did not know how not to. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," Micah said, and he almost smiled. He went back behind the counter. Wren ate her fries, slowly sipping her coffee. For the first time in 3 weeks, the knot in her chest loosened just slightly. There was something about this place, this sad little diner in this forgotten town, that made her feel like she could breathe. That feeling lasted exactly 4 minutes. The bell above the door chimed again, and the air in the diner changed. It was not a sound. It was a shift, like the barometric pressure dropping before a storm. Wren felt it before she saw it. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. Her hand moved instinctively to the bag beside her. 4 men walked in. They were not locals. They were older mid-20s wearing expensive streetwear that looked absurdly out of place in a diner that smelled like burnt grease. 2 of them were thick, heavy-set, with the flat-eyed look of men who had done ugly things and would do them again without hesitation. The third was wiry and twitchy, his eyes darting around the room like a rat looking for an exit. But it was the 4th man who made Ren's blood turn to ice. He was lean with sharp cheekbones and a tattoo of a scorpion crawling up the side of his neck. His eyes were dead. Not angry, not cruel, just empty, like a shark's eyes. He moved with a lazy confidence, hands in his pockets, a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. His name was Harker. He spotted Ren immediately. His smirk widened. "Well, well," Harker said. His voice was slick and mocking, the kind of voice that enjoyed inflicting fear the way some people enjoyed dessert. "There she is, the little runaway princess." Ren did not scream. She did not run. She had been raised in a world where fear was a weapon, and showing it was the same as handing someone a loaded gun. She set her coffee down slowly and gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles went white. "Leave me alone, Harker." Her voice was flat, controlled. "I told you people I am done." "You do not get to be done, sweetheart," Harker said, stepping closer. The other 3 men fanned out behind him, blocking the path to the front door. The wiry one moved to the hallway, cutting off the back exit. "You took something that does not belong to you. My employer is very unhappy. He wants the bag, and he wants you in a car. Right now." Ren's mind raced. She had been found. Somehow, despite the ditched phone, the cut hair, the cash purchases, they had found her. She thought about the flash drive in the bag. She thought about what might be on it. She thought about what kind of man would send 4 armed thugs to chase down a 16-year-old girl across 3 states. She needed time. "I did not take anything on purpose," Ren said, keeping her voice level. She spoke louder than necessary, making sure old Pemberton in the corner could hear every word. "I grabbed the wrong bag at the bus station. It was an accident. I will give it back, but I am not getting in a car with you." "That is not how this works," Harker said. "Then we have a problem," Ren said, "because there is an old man right there with a phone, and the police station is 5 minutes away. You want to add kidnapping to whatever your boss is already wanted for." It was a calculated bluff. She did not know if Coppervale even had a police station. But she was buying seconds, stretching the moment at her eyes flicking to Pemberton in the corner. The old man had stopped eating his pie. He was watching, his weathered face tight with alarm, one gnarled hand already reaching into his coat pocket for his phone. Harker's dead eyes narrowed. He was not used to resistance. He was especially not used to it from a teenage girl. "Last chance, princess," he said. He was not smirking anymore. "Get up, bring the bag, and walk out that door, sir. Or this gets ugly." Ren stared at him. She did not move. "No," she said. The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Harker's hands shot forward. He grabbed Ren's wrist across the table, his fingers digging into her skin with a grip that felt like a vice made of bone. He yanked her forward, pulling her half out of the booth. "I was not asking," he hissed. Behind the counter, Micah Dawson stopped breathing. He had watched the whole thing unfold with a growing dread that started in his stomach and climbed into his throat. He knew he should stay out of it. These men were dangerous, clearly dangerous. The kind of dangerous that did not exist in Coppervale, that came from a world Micah had only seen in movies and news reports. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to duck into the back office, call 911, and hide behind the fryer until the police arrived. But then he saw Harker grab her wrist. He saw the pain flash across her face, quickly smothered, because she was too proud or too stubborn to give Harker the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. And he saw her eyes. It was not just fear. It was the look of someone who knew with cold certainty that if she walked out that door, she was never coming back. It was the look of someone about to vanish. Micah Dawson did not think. He did not calculate the odds. He did not weigh the risks or consider the consequences. He just moved. He vaulted over the counter. It was a move he had imagined 100 times during long, boring shifts. Hands on the formica, swing the legs over the land on the other side. He had never actually done it before. His sneaker caught the edge of a coffee pot and sent it crashing to the floor, but he stuck the landing. He put himself between Ren and Harker. His chest was heaving. His hands were shaking. He was holding a dirty dish rag in one fist like it was a weapon. "Let her go," Micah said. His voice cracked on the second word. He was terrified. Every nerve in his body was screaming at him to run, but his feet were planted. He was not moving. Harker stared at him. For a long moment, the diner was completely silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the rain hammering on the roof. Then Harker laughed. It was a cold, dry sound like stones scraping together. "Look at this. The busboy wants to play hero." He released Ren's wrist and turned his full attention to Micah. "Go pour some coffee, kid. This is grown-up business." "Let her go," Micah said again, louder this time. "I am calling the police," old Pemberton shouted from the corner. His hands were shaking, but he had his phone out and was jabbing at the screen with the arthritic fingers. That was the trigger. Harker moved fast, faster than Micah expected. He pulled a collapsible baton from inside his jacket and flicked it open with a sharp metallic snap. The sound alone was enough to make Micah's blood go cold. But Harker did not go for the old man. He swung at Micah. The baton caught Micah on the forearm with a crack that echoed through the diner. Pain exploded up his arm, white-hot and searing. He gasped, staggering back, but he did not go down. Adrenaline raw. An animal surged through him like electricity. He shoved Harker backward with both hands, hard. Harker stumbled, surprised by the force. "Get him!" he snapped at his men. "Run!" Micah yelled at Ren. "Go out the back." Ren scrambled out of the booth, grabbing the bag. But the wiry man was blocking the hallway, and one of the heavy-set thugs was lunging toward her from the side. Micah threw himself at the closest man, the one going for Ren. They crashed into a table, sending salt shakers, a napkin holder, and bottles of ketchup and mustard flying. Glass shattered. Condiments sprayed across the floor. Micah fought with everything he had, wild and desperate throwing punches that had no technique but plenty of fury. He caught the man square on the jaw with a right hook that surprised them both. The thug stumbled, momentarily stunned, but there were 4 of them, and they were professionals. Ren did not run. She could have. The hallway was momentarily clear while the wiry man rushed to help his friends with Micah. She could have sprinted out the back door into the rain and the dark and disappeared. She had spent 3 weeks running. She was good at it. But she watched Micah, this skinny kid she had known for 15 minutes, fighting 3 men twice his size because he could not stand by while someone was taken. He was getting beaten. Badly. A fist caught him in the ribs. A knee drove into his thigh. He kept swinging, kept fighting, but he was losing ground. Ren made a decision. She grabbed the nearest heavy object she could find. A full glass bottle of ketchup, the old-fashioned kind, thick and heavy. She gripped it by the neck, swung it with both hands, and brought it crashing down on the back of the nearest thug's skull. The bottle did not break like in the movies. It connected with a dull, wet thud that vibrated up her arms. The man crumpled instantly, hitting the floor like a sack of wet cement. But the distraction cost Micah his focus. He turned toward the sound for a fraction of a second. That was when Harker came from behind. He had put the baton away. In his hand now was a knife. A 6-inch switchblade with a matte black handle, the blade catching the harsh fluorescent light. Ren saw it first. "No!" she screamed. Micah turned. Too late and not enough. The blade punched into his side just below the ribs on the left. It went in deep. Ren heard the sound, a wet, intimate sound that she would hear in her nightmares for years to come. Micah gasped. The air left his lungs all at once like someone had ripped the plug out of a balloon. He looked down at the knife in Harker's hand, still buried in his side, and his expression was not pain. It was surprise. Pure, uncomprehending surprise, as if his body had not yet informed his brain what had happened. Harker pulled the blade free. The blood came immediately. Dark, fast, terrifyingly warm. It soaked through Micah's flannel shirt and spilled over his hand as he clutched his side. He fell to his knees, then he fell to his back. The diner floor was cold against his skin, a mosaic of shattered glass, spilled ketchup, and his own blood spreading in a slow, dark pool. Harker kicked him once in the chest with cold efficiency. Micah's head cracked against the tile. "Stupid kid." Harker spat. Sirens, distant but closing. Old Pemberton had gotten through. "Cops," the wiry man hissed, eyes darting to the window. "We gotta go. Leave her!" Too much heat now. Harker looked at Wren. Then he looked at the boy bleeding on the floor. Something ugly and satisfied flickered in those dead eyes. He pointed at Wren with the bloody knife. This is not over, Wren. Tell your daddy we are coming, for the bim and for the rest. They bolted. All four of them, one half dragging the man Wren had hit with the bottle, sprinting through the front door and piling into a black Chevy Tahoe that peeled out of the parking lot just as the first red and blue lights appeared through the rain. Then they were gone. And Wren was on her knees. She was beside Micah before the echo of the Tahoe's tires had faded. The floor was a war zone. Glass ketchup, mustard, and blood. So much blood. It was spreading faster than she had thought possible, pulling around his body, soaking into the knees of her jeans. Micah's face was gray. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at the flickering fluorescent light above him. His breathing was shallow, rapid, each breath a thin whistle that sounded wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. Wren did not panic. She had grown up in clubhouses where men came in bleeding from bar fights and worse. She had watched her father's medic stitch wounds on kitchen tables. She knew the basics. She ripped off her leather jacket, balled it up, and pressed it against the wound in Micah's side with both hands, leaning her full weight into it. "Stay with me," she said. Her voice was calm, forceful, the voice of a girl who had decided that this boy was not going to die on her watch. "Stay with me, Micah. Look at me. Do not close your eyes." Micah blinked. His gaze drifted to her face. He coughed and blood flecked his lips, pink frothy. That was bad. Wren knew it was bad. "You are okay," Micah whispered. His voice was barely there, a dry rasp like dead leaves on concrete. "They did not take you." "No," Wren said. Tears were burning her eyes, but she did not let them fall. "Not yet." "No, they did not. Because of you. You held the line." Micah tried to smile. It was lopsided pale, and it broke something inside Wren that she did not know could break. "Good," he breathed. "That is good." Then his eyes rolled back and his body went slack beneath her hands. "No." Wren pressed harder on the wound. "No, no, no, Micah, stay with me." Old Pemberton was beside her, his gnarled hands pressing a stack of diner napkins against the wound alongside hers. His face was white, but his hands were steady. "Ambulance is coming, girl," he said. 3 minutes. He is strong. He will make it." Wren did not take her hands off the wound. She did not look up from Micah's face. She kept pressure. She kept talking. She told him to hold on. She told him the ambulance was close. She told him she was not going to let him go. She meant it. She meant it more than she had ever meant anything in her 16 years on this earth. 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. The ambulance arrived with the police. Paramedics rushed in, took over, cut away Micah's shirt, started IV lines. They worked fast, their voices clipped and urgent. They loaded Micah onto a stretcher and into the back of the ambulance with a speed that told Wren everything she needed to know about how bad it was. When people moved that fast, it meant there was no time to waste. Wren stood in the middle of the ruined diner covered in blood. Micah's blood. Her leather jacket was soaked dark. Her hands were red up to the wrists. She was shaking not from cold, but from the delayed shock of adrenaline finally releasing its grip. A deputy tried to talk to her. She could not hear him. The sirens were still screaming. She followed the ambulance to the hospital. She walked because her car had a flat tire and nobody had thought to offer her a ride. She walked 2 miles in the rain, carrying the black duffel bag over her shoulder, her boots splashing through puddles that reflected the red and blue lights of the patrol cars racing past her toward the diner. She did not feel the rain. She did not feel the cold. She felt only one thing. A burning crystalline resolve that settled into her bones like molten iron cooling into steel. This was her fault, all of it. A boy she had known for 15 minutes was on an operating table because she had walked into his diner carrying a problem she had no right to bring to his door. She could not undo that. She could not take back the knife. But she could make sure it meant something. She could make sure the people who did this answered for it. And she could make sure Micah Dawson did not die in the dark without someone fighting for him the way he had fought for her. The Coppervale County Hospital was a small building, 2 stories brick with a parking lot that held maybe 40 cars. It was not equipped for what had just come through its doors. The emergency room had 2 bays. The surgical suite was designed for appendectomies, not knife wounds that had shredded a liver and punctured a diaphragm. Dr. Renner, the lead trauma surgeon, a lean man with silver hair and steady hands, had been pulled from his bed at home. He arrived 9 minutes after Micah, still pulling on his scrubs. The team worked frantically. The knife had lacerated Micah's liver, nicked his diaphragm, and ruptured his spleen. He was losing blood faster than they could replace it. They poured unit after unit into him, but the monitors kept screaming. Ren sat in the waiting room. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her, casting everything in a flat, sterile white. She was still wearing Micah's blood. A nurse had offered her a change of clothes. She had refused. She did not deserve clean clothes, not while he was in there fighting. Detective Corbin found her there. He was a tired-looking man with thinning hair and a nicotine stain on his index finger. He had a notepad and a pen and the carefully neutral expression of a small-town cop who had just been handed something far bigger than his department could handle. "Miss," Corbin said, pulling a chair up beside her, "I need to get a statement. The men who did this, can you tell me who they were?" Ren looked at him. Her eyes were hard. The fear was gone, burned away by the walk in the rain, replaced by something cold and bright and sharp. She knew who Harker was. She knew who he worked for. But she also knew that Corbin, this small-town detective with his notepad and his nicotine habit, could not protect her. He could not protect Micah. He could not handle what was coming. This was bigger than Coppervale, bigger than its two-deputy police force and its sleepy courthouse. "I need to make a phone call," Ren said. "You can use the station phone later. Right now, I need to make a call now." Her voice cut through his sentence like a blade. There was an authority in it that made the detective blink. It was the voice of someone who had grown up around command, around power. She stood up and walked to the corner of the waiting room. She had bought a cheap prepaid phone in Eugene. She had never used it. She had kept it for one purpose, only a phone number she had memorized and sworn she would never dial unless the world was ending. The world was ending. She dialed. It rang twice. Yeah, a deep voice. No hello, no greeting. Just a single syllable that sounded like gravel rolling in a cement mixer. Ren closed her eyes. She had not heard that voice in 3 weeks. It sounded like home. It sounded like safety. And it sounded like everything she had been running from. "Daddy," she whispered. The silence on the other end was instant and absolute. It was the silence of a man whose entire body had gone rigid, whose heart had stopped between beats. "Ren." His voice was different now. Sharp. Lethal. "Where are you?" "I am in Oregon, a town called Coppervale." "Are you hurt?" No, I am okay." She swallowed. "But Daddy, they found me. Harker and his crew, the ones who work for Voss, they tracked me down." "I'm on my way," Gunner Calloway said. The words came fast, automatic, with the force of a freight train. "Wait," Ren said. And here it was. The moment that separated Ren from every other club daughter, every other runaway, every other girl who called her father for help. She did not just call for rescue, she set the terms. "Daddy, listen to me. A boy saved me tonight. He works at a diner. He is 17 years old. He stepped between me and Harker and took a knife for me. He is in surgery right now, and they are telling me he might not make it." Silence. "He does not know who I am," Ren continued, her voice breaking despite her best effort to hold it together. "He does not know who you are. He just saw a girl in trouble and stood up. He bled for me, Daddy." When Gunner spoke again, his voice was different. The sharpness was still there, but beneath it was something raw, something ancient. It was the voice of a man who understood sacrifice the way a priest understands prayer. "He stood for you." "Yes." "What is his name?" Micah Dawson." "Is he still breathing?" "Barely. They are in surgery now." "You tell the doctors to do everything. You tell them money is no object. You tell them Gunner Calloway is paying every bill." "Okay." And Ren, "Yes, Daddy." "Tell Micah to hold on. We are coming." "Daddy, one thing," Ren said, and this was the part that mattered. This was the line she drew in the sand. "You come for him, not for me. You come because a boy is dying for doing the right thing, and you come within the law. No rivers, no ditches, no disappearances. You come right, or you do not come at all." The pause was long. She could hear him breathing. She could hear faintly the sound of boots on concrete. He was already moving. "You do not give me orders, Ren." "I am not giving you an order. I am asking you to be the man I used to believe you were. Another pause. Longer. We are coming, Gunnar said. All of us. The line went dead. Wren lowered the phone. Her hand was shaking. She looked at Detective Corbin, who was watching her from across the room with a mixture of suspicion and unease. Who was that? Corbin asked. Your father. Wren nodded. Is he coming to pick you up? Wren looked out the window at the dark, empty parking lot. The rain had not stopped. It streamed down the glass in silver rivulets, distorting the glow of the streetlights. He is coming, Wren said quietly, but he is not coming alone. 2:45 in the morning. Dr. Renner emerged from the surgical suite looking like a man who had been in a prize fight and only barely won. His scrubs were sweat-soaked. His surgical cap was crooked. His eyes were bloodshot. He found Wren first because she was the only person in the waiting room who was sitting forward with her hands clasped, staring at the double doors like she could will them open. The boy made it through surgery, Renner said, and Wren's entire body sagged with a relief so physical it was almost violent. But it was close. The blade lacerated his liver and nicked his diaphragm. We had to remove his spleen. He has lost a massive amount of blood. He is in a medically induced coma. What are his chances? Wren asked. Dr. Renner hesitated. He was not used to being asked direct questions by teenagers covered in blood at 3 in the morning. 40%, he said. If he does not develop an infection and if his vitals stabilize over the next 48 hours, he has a fighting chance. But I will not lie to you, it is going to be close. 40%. Less than a coin flip. Wren felt the number land in her chest like a stone thrown into still water. Ripples of dread spreading outward. Can I see him? Not yet, but his mother is on her way. A nurse called her. Micah's mother arrived at 3:15. Her name was Della Dawson. She was a small woman, thin, with tired eyes and hands that were red and rough from years of hard work. She worked 2 jobs, nights at the hospital, laundry days cleaning houses on the east side of town. She had been asleep when the call came. She arrived in a coat thrown over her nightgown, her hair unbrushed, her face a mask of terror that Wren recognized because she had seen it in the mirror 20 minutes ago. When Della saw Wren, she froze. She did not know who this girl was. She only saw the blood on her clothes. Are you hurt? Della asked. Because that was the kind of woman she was. Even in the worst moment of her life, her first instinct was to care for someone else. No, ma'am, Wren said. This is not my blood. It is Micah's. He saved my life tonight. Della's face crumbled. She collapsed into a chair, pulling a rosary from her coat pocket, and began to pray. The beads clicked softly between her fingers, a tiny rhythmic sound that filled the silent waiting room. Wren sat down across from her. She did not leave. She could not. She tried to explain haltingly that help was coming, that the medical bills would be covered, that Micah would have the best care available. But how do you explain to a terrified mother that a biker army is descending on her town because her son was brave enough to stand up? You do not explain. You just sit with her. You hold the silence. You share the weight. They sat together through the darkest hours of the morning. 2 women strangers bound together by a boy's courage in a pool of blood on a diner floor. Della prayed. Wren watched the clock. The minutes crawled like wounded animals. And outside, beyond the rain, beyond the mountains, beyond the dark ribbon of highway that wound through the Oregon forests, something was building. A vibration, a pulse, like the earth itself was waking up angry. It started around 5:30. The first hint of gray light was touching the eastern sky just enough to separate the mountains from the clouds. Deputy Harris was parked on Route 9, the main highway leading into Coppervale. He was drowsy, half asleep in his cruiser, the radar gun in his lap. The night had been chaotic with the stabbing at the diner, but his sergeant had posted him here for the tail end of his shift. Watch for the black Tahoe, they said. It might double back. He was not watching for what came instead. He felt it before he heard it. A tremor. Subtle at first, like a heavy truck passing on a nearby road. The coffee in his cup holder rippled. The rearview mirror vibrated. Harris sat up, rubbing his eyes. Then came the sound. It started low, a drone like a swarm of hornets far away. But it grew. It deepened. It turned into a roar that was not a roar, but a thunder, a rolling, continuous thunder that shook the windows of his cruiser and rattled the fillings in his teeth. V-twin engines. The distinctive syncopated heartbeat of American iron. Not one, not 10, hundreds. Harris looked in his side mirror. His jaw dropped. Cresting the hill 2 miles back, a wall of headlights appeared. They stretched across both lanes of the highway, a phalanx of chrome and steel, moving in perfect formation, 3 abreast running lights blazing like the eyes of an advancing army. The lead bike was a massive custom Harley Road King, blacked out with ape hanger handlebars, and a rider who looked less like a man and more like a monument. Harris fumbled for his radio. Dispatch. Dispatch, this is Harris on Route 9. We have a situation. Go ahead, Harris. The dispatcher's voice was bored. It was the end of a long night. I have motorcycles, a lot of motorcycles, coming into town. How many 1020? The procession roared past his cruiser. The wind shook his car like a hand shaking a toy. He saw the patches on their backs, the Iron Cross, the Burning Fist, the rockers that read California, Nevada, Montana, Nomad. Dispatch, Harris whispered. There are at least 200. It is the Iron Saints, the whole charter, maybe 3 charters. The radio went silent. By the time the sun fully broke over the ridge, the roar had consumed Coppervale. Citizens waking for work peered through their curtains and saw something out of a fever dream. A river of black leather and polished chrome rolling down Main Street, shaking the autumn leaves from the trees, rattling the windows of the hardware store, drowning out the church bells that rang at 6 every morning. They ran the red lights, not recklessly, but with a terrifying coordinated authority. No car dared honk. Traffic pulled to the curb and stopped. Shopkeepers stood in their doorways, mouths open, watching the procession pass like a funeral march for a king. They turned onto Elm Street, toward the hospital. Wren heard them before she saw them. She was standing at the window of the waiting room, her arms wrapped around herself. Della was asleep in the chair behind her, finally claimed by exhaustion. The first light of dawn was coloring the sky in shades of ash and steel. Then the glass began to vibrate. The sound rose from the earth like something alive. A rumble that grew into a growl that grew into a roar that shook the pictures on the waiting room walls. Wren pressed her hand against the window. She felt the vibration through her palm, through her bones. She looked down at the parking lot. They came around the corner in a wave. Row after row of motorcycles, headlights blazing chrome gleaming in the early light. They filled the parking lot. They spilled onto the street. They lined the sidewalks. 200 machines, 200 men arranged in perfect rows like soldiers on a parade ground. At the front, the massive Road King killed its engine. The silence that followed was deafening, like the moment between lightning and thunder. 200 engines cut out in a wave one after another, the silence spreading through the formation like a held breath. Gunner Ironjaw Calloway dismounted. He was 6'4" with a beard like steel wool and arms thick as oak branches, covered in ink, that told stories of roads and brotherhood and a life lived outside the lines. He took off his helmet and hung it on the handlebar. He did not look at the security guard who had stumbled out the front door, hand on his holster, looking ready to faint. He walked straight toward the sliding glass doors. Behind him, 200 men dismounted and stood in ranks, silent, arms crossed, waiting. Inside the waiting room, Wren watched her father push through the doors. He filled the room with his presence the way a thunderstorm fills a valley. Nurses froze. An orderly dropped a clipboard. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to quiet. His eyes found Wren. "Daddy," she said. She did not run to him. She stood her ground because that was what she had promised herself she would do. She would not collapse into his arms like a little girl. Not now. Not after everything she had done to prove she was more than that. But Gunner crossed the room in 3 strides and wrapped her in his arms anyway. For one moment the mask slipped. He was not a club president. He was not Ironjaw. He was a father who had not slept in 3 weeks, who had torn the West Coast apart looking for his daughter, who had driven through the night fueled by nothing but terror and love. He held her so tight she could not breathe. She let him, just for a moment. Then she pulled back. "I am okay," she said, looking up at him with those fierce storm cloud eyes. "But he is not. Room 304. His name is Micah Dawson. 40% chance. His mother is right there." Gunner released Wren. He turned. His eyes found Della Dawson, who had been jolted awake by the noise and was now standing trembling, backed against the wall, clutching her rosary, as if it were the only thing between her and the end of the world. Gunnar walked over to her. The leather of his cut creaked with every step. His boots were heavy on the linoleum. He was a terrifying figure, a mountain of muscle and ink and scars, and Della was shaking so hard the rosary beads were clicking. He stopped in front of her. He slowly removed his sunglasses. His eyes were red-rimmed from the wind and the worry in the long night ride. But they were kind. He went down on one knee. The president of the Iron Saints knelt on the scuffed linoleum floor of a county hospital in front of a cleaning lady in a nightgown. "Ma'am," Gunnar said. His voice was a low rumble, but it was gentle, reverent. "My name is Gunnar Calloway. Your son saved my little girl's life last night." Della stared at him. She could not speak. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "There is no debt I can pay that equals what he did," Gunnar continued. "But I promise you this. Your boy is under my protection now. He is under the protection of the Iron Saints. The men who did this to him, we are going to find them." He stood up, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "And God help them," Gunnar said, "because the police will not be able to." Wren watched from across the room. She watched her father kneel before a stranger, and she saw something she had not seen in years. She saw the man she used to believe in. The man who built his kingdom not on fear, but on a code. Loyalty earned, debts paid, the weak protected by the strong. She had set the terms, he had met them, so far. But the sun was barely up, and the hardest part was still coming. Because somewhere out there, Harker was running. Somewhere out there, the man who had sent him was planning his next move. And the flash drive in the black duffel bag at Wren's feet was a ticking bomb that nobody in this room, not even her father, fully understood. Wren looked out the window at the sea of chrome and leather gleaming in the morning light. She looked at Della, who was weeping softly into her hands. She looked at the hallway leading to the ICU, where a boy she had known for 15 minutes was fighting for his life. She made a decision. The second of many she would make before this was over. She was done running. She was done hiding. She was done being the girl who grabbed the wrong bag and brought destruction to everyone she touched. She was going to fix this, not her father, not the club, not the police, her. And if Harker and the man he worked for thought a 16-year-old girl was not a threat, they were about to learn the most painful lesson of their lives. The dawn broke fully over Coppervale. The town stirred uneasily beneath the weight of 200 silent sentinels, and a secret that was about to crack it open like an earthquake. And in room 304, the cardiac monitor beeped its steady, fragile rhythm, counting the heartbeats of a boy who had stood up when the whole world told him to sit down. The story of what happened next would be told in diners and bars and around fires for decades to come. But it did not begin with the bikers. It did not begin with the club president or the sheriff or the FBI. It began with a girl named Wren who decided she was finished being someone else's tragedy. And the thunder had only just started to roll. By noon, the atmosphere in Coppervale had shifted from shock to a kind of suspended animation. The town had not been invaded. Nothing had been broken. No shots had been fired. But the presence of the Iron Saints had settled over Coppervale like a fog, thick and silent and impossible to ignore. Shops that should have been open stayed closed. Streets that should have been busy were empty. Children were kept home from school. The town held its breath and waited the way a small animal freezes when it senses a predator nearby. The hospital parking lot was a sea of black iron. 200 motorcycles gleamed in the pale autumn sun, arranged in rows so precise they looked like they had been parked with a ruler. The bikers themselves were everywhere, leaning against walls, sitting on curbs, standing in pairs and trios near the hospital entrance, smoking in the designated areas, speaking in low, disciplined tones. They were not rowdy. They were not drinking. They were not harassing the staff or intimidating the patients. They were waiting, and that silence that controlled purposeful stillness was far more terrifying than any riot could have been. Inside the hospital, Gunnar had not moved from the ICU waiting area. He sat in a plastic chair that looked comically small beneath his massive frame, a monolith of leather and ink against the pastel floral wallpaper. Flint, his sergeant-at-arms, a wiry man, with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his left ear to his chin, stood by the double doors like a sentinel carved from granite. Decker, the vice president, a man whose nickname was ironic because he stood 6'6" and weighed close to 300 pounds, was posted at the end of the hallway near the elevators. Dr. Renner emerged from the ICU at 11:45. He looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. His surgical cap was pulled low, and his eyes were heavy with the particular exhaustion of a man who had spent hours holding a young life together with his hands and his will. He stopped when he saw the wall of leather-clad men, but Gunnar raised a hand, and the men stepped up to it, creating a clear path. "Mrs. Dawson," Dr. Renner said, looking at Della. She stood up from her chair, her hands trembling, the rosary still threaded through her fingers. "He made it through the night," Renner said, and the room exhaled. "His vitals have stabilized somewhat, but the next 48 hours are critical. If the infection stays away and his body responds to the transfusions, he has a chance, a real chance. But it is going to be a long road." Della pressed the rosary to her lips, her eyes closed, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. Gunnar stood. He towered over the doctor. "What does he need?" Gunnar asked. "Excuse me. Resources, specialists, equipment, blood. Tell me what he needs. I can have a helicopter here in 20 minutes with anything you ask for." Dr. Renner blinked. He was a small-town surgeon, accustomed to working with what he had not accustomed to being offered unlimited resources by a man who looked like he could bench press the ambulance. "We have what we need for now," Renner said carefully. "But his recovery will be long. Months of rehabilitation, physical therapy, follow-up surgeries possibly." "He will have whatever he needs," Gunnar stated. It was not a request. It was a fact delivered with the same certainty as gravity. He turned to Flint. "Get on the line with the treasurer. Set up a fund for the Dawson family. Mortgage, utilities, food, everything. Mrs. Dawson does not worry about a single bill while her boy is fighting." "Done," Flint said, already pulling a phone from his cut. Wren watched this from across the room. She watched her father operate with the authority and efficiency that had built the Iron Saints from a small California riding club into one of the most powerful motorcycle organizations in the country. He was good at this. He was good at walking into a room and making people feel like the world was under control, even when it was coming apart at the seams. But Wren knew something the room did not. The world was not under control. Not even close. Because the flash drive in the black duffel bag at her feet was still a live grenade with the pin half pulled. And until she understood what was on it, none of them were safe. The double doors at the end of the hallway slammed open. Sheriff Earl Haskell marched in like a man who had been building up a full head of steam since dawn and was finally ready to blow. He was flanked by 2 deputies and Detective Corbin. Haskell was a big man, broad-shouldered with a silver buzz cut and a jaw like a cinder block. He was used to being the biggest presence in any room in Coppervale. He had held the office for 12 years. He had never had his authority challenged. He did not enjoy the experience. "All right, that is enough," Haskell announced, his voice booming through the hallway. His hand rested near his holster, more out of habit than any real intention to draw. "Mr. Calloway, we need to have a conversation. Right now." Gunnar turned slowly. He did not look intimidated. He looked faintly amused, the way a lion might look at a house cat that had wandered into its territory. "Sheriff, you cannot occupy a municipal building with a private army," Haskell said, his face flushing. "You are scaring the citizens of this town. I want your men out of this parking lot, and I want them out of this county by sundown." Gunnar took a step toward the sheriff. The physical difference was not enormous, but the presence difference was cosmic. Haskell had authority. Gunnar had gravity. "My men are parked legally," Gunnar said, his voice low and even. They are waiting for news on a boy who was nearly murdered. They are not breaking any laws. They are not blocking any roads. They are not threatening any citizens. They are standing in a parking lot, Sheriff. Is that a crime in Coppervale?" "This is an active crime scene investigation," Haskell countered, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "And you are interfering." "Interfering?" Gunnar let out a dark chuckle. "Sheriff, if we were interfering, you would know it. We are doing your job for you." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," Gunnar said, his voice dropping to a register that made the deputies shift uncomfortably, "that while your department was taking statements and processing the paperwork, 3 of my boys were running the back roads, and they found something." Flint stepped forward. He held up a folded piece of paper. Black 2018 Chevy Tahoe, Flint said. Stolen plates out of Salem, ditched on a logging road off Route 4 near the river. We have eyes on it right now, have not touched it, just watching. Detective Corbin looked at the sheriff. The sheriff looked at Corbin. The silence was damning. How did you find it that fast? Corbin asked, his voice flat. We have more eyes than you do, Gunner said simply, and we are motivated. Now, Sheriff, you can go process that vehicle. You can pull fingerprints. You can run the plates through your system. Or you can stand here and argue with me about parking regulations. Your choice. Sheriff Haskell turned a shade of red that bordered on purple. He knew he was beaten. If these bikers had found the getaway vehicle before his department, it made him look incompetent. And Haskell, for all his bluster, was not a stupid man. He knew when to cut his losses. Corbin, he barked, get a unit out to Route 4. Check that vehicle. He turned back to Gunner. If your men touch anyone in this town, if one hair on one local's head is harmed. We are not here for the locals, Gunner said. We are here for the animals who put a knife in a 17-year-old kid. And once we find them, Sheriff, you are going to wish you had found them first. The police retreated. Haskell's boots were loud and angry on the linoleum. The deputies followed like reluctant shadows. Wren had watched the entire exchange from the far end of the hallway, leaning against the wall near the vending machines. She had not spoken. She had not intervened. She had been thinking. Her father had won that round. Of course he had. Gunner Calloway did not lose confrontations. But winning a staring contest with a small-town sheriff was not going to solve the real problem. Harker was still out there. The man who had sent Harker Nolan Voss was still out there. And as long as that flash drive existed, everyone connected to it was a target. Micah, Della, Wren herself, even the Iron Saints. She needed to know what was on that drive. Wren waited until the hallway was clear. She waited until her father was deep in conversation with Flint and Decker planning the search for Harker. She waited until Della had fallen asleep again in the chair exhaustion, finally winning over grief. Then she picked up the black duffel bag, walked to the hospital's small administrative office on the first floor, and asked a nurse named Ruth if she could borrow a laptop for 30 minutes. Ruth, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who had been watching the drama unfold all morning, did not ask questions. She logged out of her workstation and left the room. Wren closed the door. She sat down. She unzipped the bag. The cash was still there. She did not count it. She did not care about it. She pulled out the flash drive, the small black rectangle taped to the lining. She peeled off the tape. She held it up to the light. It was unmarked. No label, no branding. She plugged it into the laptop's USB port. The drive contained a single folder. Inside the folder were 3 files. The first was a spreadsheet. The second was a PDF. The third was a video file. Wren opened the spreadsheet first. It took her less than 30 seconds to understand what she was looking at, and when she did, the blood drained from her face. It was a ledger. Dates, names, amounts. Payments made by Nolan Voss to law enforcement officers, city officials, judges, and federal agents across 3 states, Oregon, Washington, and Nevada. The amounts ranged from $5,000 to $200,000. The dates went back 4 years. There were dozens of names. Wren scrolled through the list, her mouth dry. She recognized some of the names from news reports. A state senator, a Port Authority director, a DEA supervisor. Then she stopped scrolling. A name jumped off the screen like a slap. Detective Harold Corbin. Coppervale County Sheriff's Department. Monthly payments of $3,000, 4 years running. The last payment was dated 6 days ago. Wren sat back in the chair. The room was spinning. The detective who was investigating Micah's stabbing, the man who had tried to take her statement, the man who was right now processing the Tahoe that the Iron Saints had found was on Nolan Voss's payroll. That meant everything Corbin learned went straight back to Voss. That meant Voss already knew where Wren was. That meant Voss already knew about the Iron Saints. That meant the investigation was compromised from the inside. She kept scrolling. The second name hit even harder. Darren Pruitt. Prospect Iron Saints, MC, Northern Nevada. Chapter. Payments of $10,000 quarterly. 18 months. Wren stared at the name until the letters blurred. She knew Pruitt. He was young, 22, eager, one of the new prospects her father had been grooming for full membership. He had been at the clubhouse in Reno the night she left. He had been one of the men assigned to watch over her. He was the reason Harker had found her. The realization was a physical blow. Wren felt it in her chest, a tightening, a compression, like someone was squeezing her lungs. She had spent 3 weeks wondering how Harker had tracked her. She had ditched her phone, cut her hair, paid cash, and avoided cameras. She had been meticulous. But Pruitt knew her habits. He knew her favorite bus routes. He knew the Greyhound stations she had mentioned wanting to visit. He had probably fed her location to Voss's people within hours of her departure. Wren opened the PDF. It was worse. Financial routing numbers, shell companies, wire transfers totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. This was not just a payoff ledger. This was the entire digital skeleton of Nolan Voss's money laundering operation. Account numbers, bank names, transaction codes. Enough to bring down not just Voss, but every person who had ever taken his money. She closed the laptop. She did not open the video file. She did not need to. She had seen enough. She sat in the quiet office for a long time, the fluorescent light humming above her, the muffled sounds of the hospital filtering through the door. She thought about what to do. Her first instinct was to go to her father, to hand him the drive and tell him everything. Gunnar would know what to do. He always knew what to do. But then she thought about Pruitt. If she told Gunnar that one of his own prospects had betrayed the club, had sold out his daughter for $40,000 a year, she knew exactly what would happen. Pruitt would disappear. A ride out to a logging road, a shallow grave. The Iron Saints code was absolute when it came to betrayal. And if that happened, the evidence on the drive would be tainted. The lawyers would argue that the club had a motive to fabricate. The whole case against Voss would unravel. Pruitt needed to be exposed cleanly, legally, with evidence that would hold up in a courtroom, not at the bottom of a river. Wren pulled the flash drive from the laptop and slipped it into the pocket of her jeans. Not the bag. The bag could be stolen. The jeans stayed on her body. She had a plan. It was not fully formed yet, but the shape of it was emerging. She needed to confirm Pruitt's betrayal independently without the flash drive. She needed a confession, and she needed to handle it in a way that kept her father's hands clean. She stood up, thanked Ruth for the laptop, and walked back upstairs. The Iron Saints had taken over the hospital's East Wing with the quiet efficiency of a military occupation. Bikers rotated shifts. Some slept in the waiting room, stretched across plastic chairs. Others patrolled the hallways in pairs. The nurses and staff had adapted with the resigned practicality of people who had no choice. The bikers were polite, said please and thank you, held doors open and kept their voices down near patient rooms. It was by all accounts the most courteous occupation in history. Wren found Pruitt in the hospital cafeteria. He was sitting alone at a table near the window picking at a sandwich. He was young with a narrow face and nervous eyes. He wore his prospect-cut the vest without full patches that marked him as a member in training. He looked up when Wren approached, and something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. "Hey, Wren," he said, trying for casual. "Glad you are safe. Your dad was out of his mind looking for you." "I know," Wren said. She sat down across from him. She did not smile. She studied his face with those storm cloud eyes, and Pruitt shifted in his seat. "I need to ask you something, Darren." "Sure, anything." "When I left Reno, I was careful. I ditched my phone. I paid cash. I did not tell anyone where I was going." She paused. "But they found me anyway. In 3 weeks, they tracked me to a tiny town in Oregon that nobody has ever heard of." Pruitt swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed visibly. "That is crazy," he said. "I mean, those guys, Voss's people, they have resources." "They do," Wren agreed. "But resources do not explain how they knew I took the Greyhound through Portland. Only someone who knew me would know that. Someone who knew my travel patterns. Someone close." The silence at the table was a living thing. Wren watched Pruitt's hands. They were shaking. Barely perceptible, but she had grown up reading men. She had grown up in rooms where a tremor in a man's hand could mean the difference between a deal and a disaster. "What are you saying?" Pruitt asked. His voice was too high, too thin. "I am saying that someone in the club gave me up," Wren said, "and I think you know who." Pruitt's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, denial, and then a crumbling, pathetic terror that confirmed everything Wren already knew. "I did not," he started. Darren. Wren's voice was quiet, but it had a blade in it. A boy is upstairs in a coma because of what happened to me. He is 17 years old. He took a knife in his side because someone told Harker exactly where to find me. If that boy dies, whoever gave up my location is responsible for his death. Not Harker, not Voss, the person who made the phone call. Pruitt's eyes filled with tears. His composure shattered like glass hitting concrete. He put his face in his hands. They said they just wanted the bay, Pruitt whispered through his fingers. They said nobody would get hurt. They said they would grab the bag and let you go. I did not know about the knife. I did not know there would be violence. How much? Wren asked. What? How much did Voss pay you? Pruitt did not answer. He did not need to. The shame on his face was a confession louder than words. 10,000 a quarter, Wren said. 18 months. I know the numbers, Darren. He looked up at her, his face wet, his eyes wide with a terror that went beyond the fear of punishment. He was looking at a 16-year-old girl who knew his secrets and held his life in her hands. Your dad is going to kill me, Pruitt whispered. Maybe, Wren said, if he finds out from someone else, if this comes out in the wrong way. Yes, my father will handle it in the old way, and you know what that means. Pruitt was shaking now, full-body tremors. But I am giving you a choice, Wren said. She pulled her prepaid phone from her pocket and set it on the table between them. You are going to tell me everything, right now, who you talked to when what you told them and how you communicated with Voss's people, and I am going to record it. Every word. And then what? And then I take this recording to Flint. Not to my father, to Flint. And Flint handles it through the club's process. You get voted out. You lose your cut. You walk away. Disgraced but alive. Pruitt stared at her. Why Flint? Why not your dad? Because if I give this to my father, he will not think about process. He will think about his daughter. And I cannot have that. Not tonight, not with everything else that is happening. Pruitt wiped his face with the back of his hand. He looked out the window at the parking lot full of motorcycles. He looked at the phone on the table. He looked at Wren. You are smarter than your old man, he said quietly. I am his daughter, Wren said. Start talking. Pruitt talked for 27 minutes. He told Wren everything. How Voss's people had approached him at a bar in Reno. How they had offered cash for small pieces of information. How it had started with harmless things, club schedules, travel routes, and gradually escalated. How he had given them Wren's location 3 days after she left, when he overheard another member mention that a gas station camera in Medford had caught someone matching her description. Wren recorded every word. When Pruitt was done, she picked up the phone and stood. Stay here, she told him. Do not talk to anyone. Do not leave this table. If you run, my father will find you, and then there will be no process. There will just be a road and a ditch. Pruitt nodded. He was broken. He sat at that table like a man waiting for his own sentencing, which in a way he was. Wren found Flint in the stairwell on the second floor, standing guard near the ICU entrance. She pulled him aside and played the recording. Flint listened without expression, his scarred face as unreadable as a cliff face. When it was done, he looked at Wren for a long moment. Your father should hear this, Flint said. Not yet, Wren said. My father will go nuclear. I need him focused on finding Harker, not tearing the club apart over a prospect. Handle Pruitt quietly. Take his cut. Put him on a bus. He does not come back. Flint studied her. There was a new respect in his eyes, the grudging acknowledgement of a man who had just watched a 16-year-old outmaneuver a problem that would have caused a club war if handled differently. You are giving me an order, Flint said. I am giving you a suggestion. A strong one. The corner of Flint's mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile Wren had ever seen on his face. I will handle it, he said, but your father finds out eventually. He always does. I know, but by then the evidence will be clean and the trail will be documented. He can be angry later. Right now, I need him clear. Flint nodded once and disappeared down the stairwell. Wren exhaled. No, one fire extinguished, but the building was still burning. She checked the time. 1:45 in the afternoon. Micah had been in the coma for 14 hours. His vitals were holding according to the nurse who had briefed Della an hour ago. Holding, but fragile. Wren walked back to the ICU waiting area. Della was awake, sitting in her chair, staring at the wall with the hollow gaze of a woman whose entire world had narrowed to the beep of a heart monitor. Wren sat down beside her. "Mrs. Dawson," Wren said softly, "have you eaten anything today?" Della shook her head. "I'm going to get you something from the cafeteria, and when I come back I need to sit with Micah for a while. Is that all right?" Della looked at her. The older woman's eyes were red and swollen, but there was a warmth in them that Wren did not deserve and could not refuse. "You have been here all night," Della said. "You have not left once." "No, ma'am." "Why?" Wren looked at the floor. She looked at her hands, which were finally clean of blood, but still felt marked by it. "Because your son did not leave me," Wren said. "He could have hidden behind the counter. He could have walked away, but he stood up for a girl he did not know. That is the bravest thing I have ever seen in my life, Mrs. Dawson. And I have seen brave men, so the least I can do is sit in a chair." Della reached over and took Wren's hand. She held it tight the way a drowning person holds a rope. "He has always been like that," Della whispered. "Even when he was little, always standing up for the smaller kids, always getting hurt for it." She paused. "His father left when he was 9. Just drove away one morning and never came back. Left the car in the driveway with a busted transmission like a final insult. Micah has been trying to fix that car ever since. I think he believes if he fixes the car, he fixes everything." Wren squeezed Della's hand. She did not trust her voice to speak. She got Della a sandwich and a coffee from the cafeteria, then walked to the ICU. The nurses let her in. Gunner's influence, or maybe just the look in her eyes. She sat in the stiff vinyl chair beside Micah's bed and looked at him. He looked impossibly young against the white sheets. The tubes, the IV, lines the monitors, the drainage bag near his abdomen. It was a landscape of fragility that made something inside Wren ache with a ferocity she had not known she was capable of. His face was pale, almost translucent, but his chest rose and fell with a rhythm that was steady. Steady was good. Steady was alive. She sat with him for an hour. She did not speak much. She held his hand once briefly, feeling how cold his fingers were. She told him to hold on. She told him the doctors said he was strong. She told him she was going to fix this. Then she heard the footsteps in the hallway, and something prickled at the base of her skull. An instinct. The animal awareness that had kept her alive for 3 weeks on the road. 2 people were walking down the ICU corridor. Their footsteps were wrong. Hospital staff wore soft-soled shoes. Sneakers, clogs, the rubber-bottom shoes designed for 12-hour shifts on hard floors. These footsteps were sharp, crisp. The click of hard-soled dress shoes on linoleum. Wren stood up slowly. She moved to the doorway of Micah's room and looked down the hall. 2 men were approaching. They wore blue hospital scrubs and ID badges clipped to their chest pockets. They carried clipboards. They looked at a glance like every other hospital worker who had passed through the corridor that day. But Wren did not look at a glance. She looked at their feet. Black leather dress shoes, polished, expensive. The kind of shoes a man wore to a business meeting, not to a 12-hour nursing shift. And beneath the loose scrub pants, she could see the bulge at the ankle of the man on the right. A holster. Wren's heart slammed into her ribs. She pulled back into the room out of their line of sight. Her mind raced. Cleaners. Voss had sent cleaners. They were here to finish what Harker had started to eliminate the witness. Micah was unconscious, defenseless, connected to machines that could be disconnected in seconds. Wren did not scream. She did not run into the hallway. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to the number Flynn had given her 20 minutes ago. 2 men, fake scrubs, hard shoes, armed, ICU hallway, coming toward room 304. Now, she hit send, then she moved. She crossed the room to Della, who had come in while Wren was sitting with Micah and was now dozing in the corner chair. "Mrs. Dawson," Wren said, shaking the woman's shoulder gently but firmly, "I need you to come with me, right now." Della blinked, confused. What is wrong? "Please trust me. We need to step out of the room for a moment. There is a restroom down the hall to the left. I need you to go there and lock the door. Do not come out until I come get you." The urgency in Wren's voice cut through Della's drowsiness. She stood clutching her rosary and moved toward the door. Wren walked with her, positioning herself between Della and the corridor, shielding the older woman from view. "Go now!" Left then second door on the right. Della went. She was scared, but she moved. Ren turned back to face the hallway. She pulled out her phone and opened the camera. She pressed record. The two men were 15 feet away. They had not noticed the text. They had not noticed Della leaving. They were focused on the room numbers, their eyes scanning the placards beside each door. 301, 302, 303. They reached 304. The one on the left reached for the door handle. "Can I help you?" Ren said. She stepped into the doorway, blocking their path. Her phone was in her hand, the camera facing them, recording. The men froze. Up close, the disguise was even worse. The scrubs were too new, unwashed, still creased from the packaging. The ID badges had stock photos, and their eyes, hard, flat, professionally empty, were nothing like the tired, compassionate eyes of the nurses who had been caring for Micah. "We are here to check the patient's vitals," the one on the right said. His voice was clipped, rehearsed. "His nurse was here 20 minutes ago," Ren said. "His vitals are stable, and you are not on the rotation board. I checked." She had not checked, but they did not know that. The men exchanged a look, a micro-expression, the silent communication of professionals whose cover had been blown. "Step aside, miss," the one on the left said. His hand moved toward his waistband. "I would not do that," Ren said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Because in about 3 seconds, two very large men are going to come through that stairwell door behind you, and they are not going to ask for your ID." The stairwell door burst open. Decker came through first, and when a man that size moves at full speed in a confined space, the effect is seismic. Behind him was another Iron Saint, a nomad named Cutler, who was nearly as large and twice as mean. The cleaners reacted instantly. They were trained, disciplined, and they knew when a situation had gone sideways. The one on the right reached for the ankle holster. He never got there. Decker's hand closed around his wrist and twisted. The sound of cartilage popping was audible. The man screamed a short, strangled sound, and Decker slammed him into the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. The second cleaner tried to run. Cutler caught him by the collar of his stolen scrubs and dragged him backward. The clipboard clattered to the floor. A compact pistol fitted with a suppressor slid out of the clipboard's metal clip and skittered across the linoleum. It was over in 8 seconds. No shots fired, no patients disturbed. Just the sound of two men being pressed against the floor by 400 pounds of biker muscle, zip ties being cinched around their wrists, and the quiet click of Ren's phone as she stopped recording. She looked at the video on her screen. Clear, sharp, both men's faces visible, the concealed weapon in frame, timestamp in the corner. Evidence. Ren saved the video, duplicated it, and sent a copy to the prepaid email address she had created that morning. Then she slipped the phone back in her pocket. Flint arrived 30 seconds later, slightly out of breath. He looked at the two men on the floor, then at Ren. "How did you know?" he asked. "They're shoes," Ren said. "Nurses do not wear Italian leather on a 12-hour shift." Flint almost smiled again. "What do you want to do with them?" "Hold them somewhere secure. Do not hurt them. I need them alive and presentable for the police." She paused. "Not Corbin, not the local police. When the time comes, these two go to the FBI." "The FBI?" Flint raised an eyebrow. "Detective Corbin is compromised. He is on Voss's payroll. I have proof." She tapped to her pocket where the flash drive sat. "Everything goes federal or everything falls apart." Flint looked at her for a long moment. He had served under Gunner for 15 years. He had seen men and women from every walk of life, tough and soft, brave and cowardly. But he had never seen anything quite like this. A 16-year-old girl standing in a hospital corridor over two disarmed assassins, calmly dictating the chain of evidence. "Your father needs to know about this," Flint said. "All of it." "I know," Ren said, "and I am going to tell him right now." She found Gunner in the parking lot, standing beside his Road King, talking on a phone. His face was dark, the lines around his eyes deep with tension. When he saw Ren approaching, he ended the call. "We found Harker," Gunner said before she could speak. One of the prospects spotted his driver buying cigarettes at a gas station 3 miles out, followed him to a motel on the edge of town. Blue Ridge Motor Lodge, room 12. 3 men inside. They are laying low, waiting for dark to move. "I know about Harker," Ren said, "but we have a bigger problem." She told him. All of it. The flash drive, the ledger, the payments, Corbin, the cleaners in the hospital now zip-tied in a storage room. She told him about Pruitt, about the confession, about Flint handling the removal. She did not tell him gently. She told him like a field commander delivering a situational briefing. Facts, clear, unadorned. Gunnar listened without interrupting. His face went through a transformation that Wren had seen before, the slow, tectonic shift from calm to fury. When she mentioned Pruitt, a vein in his temple began to pulse. When she mentioned the cleaners in the hospital, his hands closed into fists that looked like sledgehammers. When she finished, the silence between them was a canyon. Pruitt, Gunnar said. The single word carried enough venom to kill. Flint is handling it. By the book. Pruitt is already gone. He should be in the ground. And if he were, the flash drive evidence would be compromised. Every lawyer Voss hires would argue the data was fabricated by a club with a grudge. Pruitt walking away clean keeps the evidence clean. Gunnar stared at his daughter. The fury was still there, roiling beneath the surface like magma beneath stone. But something else was there too. Recognition. He was seeing her maybe for the first time, not as his little girl, not as the princess of the Iron Saints, but as a strategist, a leader. You handled this, he said slowly. All of this without telling me. Yes, because you did not trust me to keep my hands clean. Because I know you, Daddy, you would have killed Pruitt, and then Voss walks free. The words hung between them like smoke. So what do you want to do? Gunnar asked. And there it was, the most powerful man in the Iron Saints asking his 16-year-old daughter for the plan. Harker is the key, Wren said. He is the link between Voss and the knife in Micah's side. Right now, Voss does not know we have the flash drive. He thinks Harker failed to get it. He is desperate. He will be sending more people, more cleaners. We cannot play defense forever. So we go on offense, Gunnar said. Yes, but not your way. We use Harker. We make him call Voss. We tell Voss that Harker has the girl and the bag. We tell him to come personally to collect. And when he does, we hand him to the FBI with the flash drive taped to his chest. Gunnar was quiet for a long time. He looked at the rows of motorcycles gleaming in the afternoon light. He looked at the hospital where a boy was fighting for his life. He looked at his daughter standing before him with blood still under her fingernails in a plan that was colder and more calculated than anything his war council had ever produced. Micah did not stab anyone, Wren said, and her voice cracked for the first time since the parking lot conversation began. He did not pull a gun. He did not threaten anyone. He just stood up. He stood up, Daddy. And if you go out there and beat Harker to death or throw Voss in a river, you are betraying everything that boy represents. You are proving that the only answer to violence is more violence. And that is not why I called you. Gunnar looked at his daughter. His eyes were wet. He would deny it later, would blame it on the wind and the road dust. But in that moment, in the pale autumn light of a hospital parking lot in a town nobody had ever heard of, the president of the Iron Saints had tears in his eyes. Where, he asked. The old sawmill off Route 4 past the river. Flint mentioned it when he was scouting the back roads for the Tahoe. It is abandoned, isolated, big enough to set a trap. The nomads can position themselves in the catwalks and behind the machinery. When Voss shows up, we light him up not with guns, with floodlights. Blind his team. Overwhelm them. Restrain them. And then we call the real law. And if Voss does not come personally, he will. He has to. The flash drive has enough to put him away for life. He cannot trust anyone else to retrieve it. He has to see it destroyed with his own eyes. Gunnar studied her face. He was looking for doubt, for hesitation, for the cracks that would tell him she was in over her head. He did not find them. When, he asked. Tonight. Harker makes the call at sundown. Voss flies and drives out to the mill. We end this before another sun rises over this town. Gunnar nodded. It was slow, deliberate. The nod of a man who had just ceded command of the most important operation of his life to his teenage daughter. Flint, he called out. His sergeant-at-arms appeared from behind a row of bikes, phone in hand. Get the nomads together. We ride at dusk and bring Harker to me alive. We need him to make a phone call. And Gunnar, Wren said. He turned back to her. Beanbag rounds, non-lethal. Everyone goes home breathing. Everyone goes to prison, not to the morgue. Gunnar exhaled through his nose. It was the sound of a bull being told to stand down. Every instinct in his body was screaming for blood. But his daughter was standing in front of him, asking for justice instead of vengeance. And somewhere above them, behind a window on the second floor, a boy who had never thrown a punch in anger and was teaching them all what real courage looked like. Non-lethal, Gunnar repeated. Fine. But if they shoot first, we finish it. Fair, Wren said. Gunnar turned and walked toward the hospital entrance, barking orders into his phone. Flint fell into step beside him. Decker brought up the rear. The machine was moving. Wren stood alone in the parking lot for a moment. The autumn wind pulled at her short hair. The sun was beginning its long descent toward the western ridge, painting the sky in shades of amber and steel. In a few hours it would be dark. She looked up at the second floor, room 304. She could see the faint blue glow of the cardiac monitor through the window. Hold on, Micah, she whispered. I am going to finish this. She turned and walked back into the hospital. She had a trap to build. The sun dipped below the tree line at 6:17 that evening, and the shadows of the Douglas firs stretched across Coppervale like long dark fingers reaching for the town. The temperature dropped fast. The rain had stopped, but the air was raw, carrying the smell of wet pine and cold stone. At 6:45, Flint and 4 nomads brought Harker to the hospital basement. They had taken the motel room 30 minutes earlier, a swift, silent breach that had lasted less than 15 seconds. Harker and his 2 remaining men were bound, gagged, and transported in a dry cleaning van that left no trace. The motel room was wiped clean. Harker sat in a folding chair in the basement storage room, his face swollen, his scorpion tattoo distorted by a bruise that ran from his cheekbone to his jaw. His dead shark eyes were alive now, for the first time flickering with something that looked very much like fear. Wren walked in. She pulled up a chair and sat across from him. Hello, Harker, she said. He spat on the floor. You're Daddy's little errand girl now. No, Wren said calmly. I am the one who decides what happens to you. My daddy wanted to drive you to the river and let the current sort it out. I talked him out of it. You should be grateful. Harker's eyes narrowed. Here is what is going to happen, Wren said. You are going to call Nolan Voss. You are going to tell him that you have me and you have the bag. You are going to tell him that the biker situation is under control, but that the highways are being watched by the police, so he needs to come to you. You are going to give him the address of the old sawmill off Route 4, and you are going to sound convincing. And if I do not, then I hand the flash drive to the FBI tonight. Your name is on it, Harker, 6 payments totaling $80,000. You are not just a hired hand. You are a co-conspirator. Without Voss here to cut a deal, the full weight falls on you. 25 to life federal. Harker stared at her. The calculation behind his eyes was almost visible, gears turning, options, narrowing, exits closing one by one. If I do this, Harker said slowly, what happens to me? You go to jail, but you go as a cooperating witness, not a primary defendant. The difference is 15 years. Your daddy agreed to this. My daddy does what I tell him tonight. Make the call, Harker. It is the smartest move you have left. Harker looked at the door where Decker's shadow filled the frame. He looked at the concrete walls. He looked at the girl sitting across from him with the eyes of a storm and the composure of a general. He made the call. It lasted 90 seconds. His voice was steady, almost professional. He told Voss that the girl was secured, that the bag was intact, that the biker club had been handled through the local police, and that the mill off Route 4 was the safest extraction point. Midnight. Voss agreed. His voice on the speaker was thin, impatient, the voice of a man who was used to problems being solved before they reached his desk. He would be there with his team. He wanted the drive. He wanted confirmation that every loose end was tied. Wren ended the call. Thank you, Harker, she said, standing up. For the first time in your life, you just did the right thing. She walked out of the room. In the hallway, Gunnar was waiting. He had heard everything through the door. Midnight, Wren said. Midnight, Gunnar repeated. They looked at each other. Father and daughter. The lion in the storm. I am coming with you, Wren said. No. I am coming, Daddy. This is my plan, my evidence, my responsibility. I started this, and I am going to be there when it ends. Gunnar opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He had been arguing with Wren since she was 4 years old and had never won. He was not going to start winning now. You stay in the van, he said. You do not enter the building. You do not put yourself in the line of fire. I will be on the catwalk, Ren said. Above the floor, out of range. I control the lights. When I give the signal, the floodlights go on and your nomads move. That is my position. Gunnar shook his head slowly, but there was pride in his eyes. A deep, aching pride that mingled with the fear every father feels when he realizes his child has become something stronger than he ever imagined. You are too much like me, he said. No, Daddy, Ren said. I am better. She turned and walked toward the stairwell, already running the logistics in her head. The sawmill, the catwalks, the floodlights, the positions, the timing. The trap was set, the bait was laid, and in 6 hours the man who had ordered a hit on a 16-year-old girl over a stolen bag was going to walk into a ruin in the Oregon darkness and discover that the girl he had underestimated was the most dangerous person in the room. The night was coming, and Ren Calloway was ready for it. The old Coppervale sawmill sat on a high bluff overlooking the Deschutes River Fork, a skeletal ruin of rusted corrugated metal and rotting timber that had been slowly surrendering to the Oregon elements since the logging industry collapsed in the late 90s. The main warehouse was a vast cathedral-like space, 2 stories of open floor beneath a lattice of steel catwalks and overhead beams. The roof was half gone, stripped by decades of winter storms, letting in the sky. What remained was a patchwork of corrugated panels and naked rafters, a cage of iron bones open to the night. The rain had started again at 10, a cold, relentless Oregon drizzle that turned the dirt access road into a river of black mud and made the metal surfaces of the mill slick and treacherous. By midnight, the temperature had dropped into the low 40s, the kind of cold that seeped through leather and denim and settled into the marrow. It was the perfect place for a ghost to meet his maker. Ren Calloway arrived at the sawmill at 9:30, 3 hours before the meeting. She came in the dry cleaning van with Flint and 2 nomads riding in silence through the dark forest roads. The headlights were off. They navigated by moonlight and memory, the van crawling through the mud like a creature that did not want to be seen. She had spent the hours between Harker's phone call and departure doing what she did best: planning. She had drawn the layout of the sawmill from memory on the back of a hospital cafeteria napkin. She had identified the catwalks, the machinery positions, the blind spots, the choke points. She had calculated sight lines from the overhead beams to the warehouse floor. She had worked out the positioning of the floodlights, 6 high-intensity construction lamps that the nomads had pulled from a hardware store in the next town over, each one capable of throwing 14,000 lumens of blinding white light. She had thought about what could go wrong. She had built contingencies. She had made Flint repeat the plan back to her twice, and when he got a detail wrong the second time, she corrected him without hesitation. She was 16 years old and she was commanding a military operation. The nomads moved through the sawmill like ghosts. These were not weekend riders or barroom brawlers. The Iron Saints Nomad chapter was the club's elite men with no fixed address who traveled between chapters handling the organization's most sensitive and dangerous work. Several were former military. 2 had done tours in Afghanistan. 1 had been a Marine Corps sniper before he traded his dress blues for a leather cut. They knew how to set an ambush the way a surgeon knew how to hold a scalpel. They rigged the floodlights in the rafters, angling them downward toward the center of the warehouse floor. They ran the power cables along the catwalks, connecting them to a portable generator that Ren had ordered, placed on the far side of the building behind a concrete wall where its hum would be masked by the sound of the rain. The lights were wired to a single switch, a killbox control that Ren would hold in her hand from her position on the catwalk 30 feet above the floor. The nomads took their positions. Some lay flat on the overhead beams, invisible in the darkness. Others crouched behind the rusting hulks of decommissioned sawmill machinery, bandsaws and planers, and conveyor frames that had not moved in 20 years. Each man carried a shotgun loaded with beanbag rounds per Ren's orders. Non-lethal. Each man also carried a sidearm on his hip, loaded with hollow points, in case non-lethal stopped being an option. Gunnar Calloway took his position at midnight. He stood in the center of the warehouse floor alone, a solitary figure in the vast dark space. The only light came from a single work lamp placed on the floor behind him, casting his massive shadow across the debris-littered concrete like a sundial marking the final hours. He wore his boots and the expression of a man who had been in 100 fights and was ready for one more. 10 feet behind him, Harker sat tied to a wooden chair. He was gagged, his face a swollen mask of bruises and regret. He had made the call. He had played his part. Now he was a prop, a piece of stage dressing to make the scene look right when the audience arrived. Wren climbed the ladder to the catwalk at 11:45. The metal rungs were slick with rain and rust, and her hands were numb from the cold, but she moved with a sureness that surprised even her. She found her position a section of the catwalk directly above the center of the floor, where she had a clear view of the entire space below. She crouched behind the railing, the floodlight switch in her left hand, her phone in her right. She looked down at her father standing alone in the dark and felt a terror so profound it nearly buckled her knees. If this went wrong, if Voss's men were better than expected, if the plan fell apart, her father would be the first one in the crossfire. She pushed the fear down. She locked it in a room in the back of her mind and closed the door. There would be time for fear later. Right now, there was only the plan. At 12:07, Flint's voice crackled in her earpiece, low distorted by the cheap radio. 2 SUVs on the access road, lights off, moving slow. They are using the tree line for cover. Wren pressed the transmit button. How many cannot tell yet. Stand by. A pause. 20 seconds that felt like 20 minutes. Then Flint's voice again tighter now. 2 black Cadillac Escalades. Armored. I can see the reinforced glass from here. These are not streetcars, Wren. These are military grade. Wren's stomach dropped. Armored SUVs meant Voss had brought a serious team. This was not a pickup crew. This was an extraction force. Hold positions, Wren whispered into the radio. Nobody moves until I say. The 2 Escalades rolled into the warehouse through the main loading bay door, their tires crunching softly on the broken concrete. They moved like hearses, dark and deliberate, their engines barely audible above the rain. They stopped 20 yards from where Gunner stood, forming a V-shape, the headlights off, but the parking lights casting a faint amber glow. The engines died. Silence. Rain on metal. The drip of water through the broken roof. Gunner's breathing steady and slow, the metronome of a man who had long ago made peace with the possibility of his own death. The doors opened. 6 men stepped out. They were not street criminals. They were not hired muscle. They moved with fluid, lethal economy, spreading out instantly, checking corners, scanning the darkness with the practiced efficiency of men who had cleared rooms in war zones. They wore tactical vests over dark clothing and carried suppressed carbines held at the low ready. Night vision goggles sat atop their heads, ready to be pulled down. Wren watched from above her, pulse hammering in her ears. These were private military contractors. Mercenaries. The kind of men that corporations and cartels kept on retainer for situations that required precision violence. 6 of them. She had planned for 4, maybe 5. Then the passenger door of the lead Escalade opened, and Nolan Voss stepped out. He was a disappointing figure for a man who had caused so much destruction. Small, slight, wearing a charcoal wool overcoat that probably cost more than Della Dawson made in 6 months. He had thin hands, wire-rimmed glasses, and the fastidious, impatient manner of a man who was accustomed to delegating unpleasantness. He held a black umbrella over his head, shielding himself from the leaks in the roof, fussy and precise, even in a ruin. He scanned the warehouse. He saw Harker tied to the chair, slumped and silent. He saw Gunner standing tall in the center of the floor, unmoving arms crossed. He did not see the girl. "You are not Harker," Voss said. His voice was calm, almost bored, the voice of a man who viewed the world as a series of transactions, some of which were merely more inconvenient than others. "Harker is indisposed," Gunner replied. His voice echoed in the vast space like the rumble of a distant engine. "I am the father." Voss sighed. He checked his cuticles as if this were a minor scheduling conflict. "The biker. I was hoping to avoid this. It is all so theatrical." He gestured to his men with a lazy wave of his hand, the way someone might gesture to a waiter. "Kill him. Find the girl. Find the drive. Burn the building. I have a flight to catch." The 6 mercenaries raised their rifles in unison. The air hummed with the tension of imminent violence. 6 red laser sights appeared on Gunner's chest, converging into a cluster of lethal light over his heart. Wren's hand tightened on the switch. "Now," she said into the radio. She threw the switch. The warehouse exploded with light. 6 high-intensity flood lamps blazed to life simultaneously, turning the dark cathedral of rust and timber into a blinding white inferno. 14,000 lumens per lamp, 84,000 lumens total, all of it directed downward at the warehouse floor where the mercenaries stood. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The mercenaries, whose eyes had been adjusted to the near-total darkness for the last several minutes, were hit with a wall of light that was physically painful. 2 of them stumbled backward, hands flying to their faces. One dropped to a knee, his rifle swinging wildly. The night vision goggles still perched atop their heads, but catching the reflected glare turned into instruments of additional disorientation. At the same moment the nomads moved. They did not drop from the rafters like action movie heroes. They came from behind the machinery, from the shadows along the walls, from positions that the mercenaries had not been able to check because Ren had placed the floodlights to create specific blind spots. They came fast and hard, shotguns leveled, closing the distance before the mercenaries could recover. 2 beanbag rounds hit the nearest mercenary in the chest. The impact was massive, 200 grams of lead shot in a fabric pouch traveling at 300 feet per second. He went down hard, his rifle flying from his hands, the wind knocked out of him so completely that he could not even scream. A second mercenary went down the same way, hit from the side by a nomad who had been lying behind a conveyor frame for 2 hours without moving. But the remaining 4 were faster than Ren had anticipated. These were combat veterans, men who had been ambushed before, men whose training kicked in even through the shock and the light. They adapted in seconds. 2 of them dropped behind the armored escalades, using the vehicles as cover, and began returning fire. Not blind panic fire. Controlled aimed bursts directed at the muzzle flashes of the nomads' shotguns. The suppressed carbines made a sound like angry whispers. Rounds punched into the machinery, sparking off metal, sending shards of rust and debris flying through the air. 1 round hit the concrete pillar 6 inches from a nomad's head. Another shattered a floodlight, cutting the illumination by a sixth and creating a pocket of shadow near the loading bay. Ren pressed herself flat against the catwalk, grating, her heart slamming against her ribs. This was not going according to plan. The beanbag rounds were supposed to take them all down in the first 5 seconds. The mercenaries were supposed to be disoriented, overwhelmed, finished before they could organize a response. Instead, they were fighting back. Below her, Gunnar was moving. The moment the lights came on, he had dropped to one knee and rolled behind a stack of old timber pallets. He was big, but he was fast when he needed to be, and 30 years of bar fights and back alley brawls had given him an instinct for combat that no amount of training could match. A mercenary came around the side of the Escalade, rifle up, sweeping for targets. He spotted Gunnar behind the pallets and swung the barrel toward him. Gunnar did not wait. He charged. It was not tactical. It was not sophisticated. It was a 240-pound man propelled by fury and adrenaline, closing a 10-foot gap in less than a second. He lowered his shoulder and hit the mercenary like a freight train. The man flew backward into the side of the Escalade with a sound like a car wreck, the armored panel denting inward, his rifle spinning away into the dark. But the impact cost Gunnar. The mercenary, even as he was being slammed into the vehicle, managed to fire. A single round from the suppressed carbine caught Gunnar in the left shoulder. Not a clean hit, more of a graze that tore through the leather of his cut and carved a furrow across the top of his deltoid, but the pain was immediate and savage. Gunnar roared, "Aramar!" Not in pain, but in anger. He grabbed the stunned mercenary by his tactical vest and hurled him into the concrete floor. The man bounced once and did not get up. 2 more mercenaries were down now, overwhelmed by the nomads in close quarters. The ex-Marine sniper had abandoned his shotgun and was using his hands methodically, dismantling a man twice his size with joint locks and controlled strikes that came from a decade of combatives training. Another nomad, a former Army Ranger named Cutler, had simply picked up a mercenary and thrown him through the windshield of the second Escalade. But the last 2 mercenaries had found cover behind a concrete pillar near the loading bay, and they were laying down disciplined fire that pinned 2 of the nomads behind a bandsaw housing. The situation was stuck a temporary stalemate in a fight that needed to end fast. Ren watched from above. She saw the geometry of the fight, the angles, the positions of the problem. The 2 remaining mercenaries were in a blind spot, shielded from the floodlights and protected by the concrete pillar. The nomads could not get to them without crossing an open kill zone. But Ren could see them. From the catwalk, she was directly above and behind their position. They did not know she was there. She looked at the remaining floodlights. 5 were still operational. 4 were aimed at the center of the floor where the fight had already moved past. 1 was aimed at the loading bay but at the wrong angle. It was illuminating the area in front of the mercenaries, not behind them. Ren crawled along the catwalk. The metal grating was wet and cold beneath her hands and knees. She moved quietly, her weight distributed, each placement deliberate. She reached the floodlight nearest to the mercenary's position. It was mounted on a clamp attached to the railing. She grabbed the housing, felt the heat radiating through the metal casing, and twisted. The lamp swiveled on its mount. The beam of light swept across the warehouse wall like a searchlight, and then it hit the 2 mercenaries full in the face from their unprotected flank. They flinched. One raised his arm to shield his eyes. A half-second opening. Decker came around the pillar like a landslide. He hit the first mercenary with a clothesline that nearly took the man's head off, sending him spinning across the concrete. The second tried to swing his rifle toward the new threat, but Flint was already there, the collapsible baton in his hands swinging in a vicious arc that cracked against the man's forearm. The rifle dropped. A second strike to the back of the knee put the mercenary on the ground. A third strike controlled precise to the side of the helmet, and the man went limp. Silence. The fight was over. It had lasted less than 90 seconds, but it had felt like an hour. The warehouse floor was a wreck. Bullet holes in the machinery, shattered floodlights, dented escalades, unconscious mercenaries scattered like broken toys. And in the middle of it all, Nolan Voss. He had not run. He had not fought. He had simply stood beside his Escalade, with his umbrella clutched in both hands, watching the chaos with the paralyzed disbelief of a man who had always paid others to handle violence and had never, not once, been in the same room when it happened. His umbrella was gone, now knocked away by a stray round that had passed close enough to shred the fabric. His expensive coat was spattered with rain and concrete dust. His wire-rimmed glasses sat crooked on his face. He looked like a man whose entire world had just been rearranged without his permission. Gunnar walked toward him. The left side of Gunnar's cut was dark with blood from the shoulder wound, but he moved with the same unstoppable purpose as a river finding its way to the sea. He reached Voss and grabbed him by the collar of his charcoal overcoat. Voss tried to speak. "You cannot. I have immunity. I have files. I know people. I have connections at will." "Shut up," Gunnar said. Not loudly, not angrily, just a flat, definitive command that closed Voss's mouth like a door being slammed. Gunnar dragged him across the warehouse floor, through the loading bay, out into the rain. The bluff overlooked the river, and the sound of the water swollen by days of rain was a constant churning roar far below. The drop was 80 feet, maybe more. The current was fast, dark, and merciless. Gunnar pushed Voss to the edge. The smaller man stumbled, nearly going over. He caught himself arms pinwheeling and looked down at the black water rushing below. "Please," Voss said. The word came out thin and high-stripped of every pretense, every layer of sophistication and power. It was the naked sound of a man who had finally encountered something his money could not fix. "Please, I can pay you. Anything. Name a price." Flint appeared at Gunnar's side. He looked at the river, then at Voss, then at Gunnar. His scarred face was unreadable in the rain. "River is deep," Flint said quietly. "Current is fast. Nobody would ever find him." Gunnar stood at the edge of the bluff, rain streaming down his face, blood running down his arm, and looked at the man who had sent killers after his daughter. The man who had ordered a 16-year-old girl brought in or killed over a flash drive. The man whose greed and paranoia had put a knife in the side of a 17-year-old kid who was guilty of nothing except courage. He thought about the river. He thought about how easy it would be. One push, a short fall, the cold water and the current would do the rest. No body, no trial, no lawyers, no appeals. Just gravity and the river and the rain washing everything clean. The old Gunnar would have done it. The man he had been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, would not have hesitated. The code of the outlaw was simple, blood for blood, the books balanced with a body. But then he heard the footsteps on the metal stairway behind him. Light footsteps, quick and sure, descending from the catwalk. Wren appeared at the edge of the loading bay. She was soaked, her short hair plastered to her forehead, her face pale in the rain. She had a cut on her palm from the floodlight housing, and blood was running between her fingers, mixing with the rainwater. She walked toward her father. She did not run. She did not shout. She walked with the measured, deliberate pace of someone who knew exactly what she was about to do and exactly why. She stopped 3 feet from the edge of the bluff. She looked at Voss whimpering in the rain. She looked at her father bleeding, breathing hard, his hand still gripping the smaller man's collar. "Daddy," Wren said. Gunnar did not look at her. His jaw was locked. The muscles in his arm were rigid, his fist bunched in the fabric of Voss's coat. The rain ran into his eyes and down his beard and off the tip of his chin. "Daddy, look at me." He turned his head, just enough to see her. "The boy in that hospital," Wren said, and her voice was steady despite the rain and the cold and the fear that was eating through her resolve. "He did not kill anyone. He did not break any bones. He did not throw anyone off a cliff. He walked into a fight with 3 armed men carrying nothing but a dish rag. And he won. Not because he was stronger, because he was better. He was better than them, and he was better than this." She gestured to the scene, the bluff, the river, the weeping man at the edge. "If you throw him off that cliff, you prove every person who ever called you a thug, right? You prove every cop, every prosecutor, every reporter who said the Iron Saints are just criminals with motorcycles. And you prove Micah wrong. You prove that standing up, doing the right thing, bleeding for a stranger, none of it matters. Because in the end, the biggest fist wins." Gunnar stared at her. His eyes were burning, not from the rain, from something deeper, something that was tearing through the walls he had built around himself over decades of living outside the law. "He ordered them to kill you," Gunnar said. His voice was raw, broken in places he did not know could break. "He sat in his car and said the words, 'Killer,' like you were nothing. Like my baby girl was a line item on a ledger." "I know," Wren said, "and that is why this has to go to court. That is why the world has to hear those words. Not in a river, not in the dark, in a courtroom. On the record, where it counts." She took a step closer, close enough to touch him. "If you do this, I lose you, not because you go to prison, because I will never be able to look at you the same way again. And I just got you back, Daddy. I just started seeing the man I used to believe in. Do not take that away from me." The silence between them was absolute. Even the rain seemed to pause, holding its breath. Gunnar looked at his daughter. He looked at Voss. He looked at the river. He released his grip. Voss collapsed onto the wet ground, gasping, curling into himself like a child who had just woken from a nightmare. His expensive coat was ruined. His glasses were gone, fallen into the mud. He was weeping without sound, his body shaking. Gunnar stepped back from the edge. He turned away from the river and faced his daughter. The rain ran between them like a curtain. "Call the sheriff," Gunnar said. His voice was quiet now, drained. The voice of a man who had just fought the hardest battle of his life and won by not throwing a single punch. "Tell him we have a present for the FBI." "The FBI?" Voss looked up from the mud, his face contorted with a new kind of terror. "You are turning me over. You cannot. They will. If I talk, I am dead inside. Every contact, every connection. You should have thought about that before you sent killers after a child," Wren said, looking down at him. "You are going to federal prison, Mr. Voss, and I am going to make sure every piece of evidence on that flash drive follows you through the door. Every bribe, every payment, every name. The prosecutors are going to build a case so airtight that your lawyers will retire out of embarrassment." She pulled the flash drive from her pocket. She held it up in the rain, the small black rectangle that had started everything. "This does not go to Detective Corbin. This does not go to the local police. This goes directly to the Portland field office, hand-delivered. Your bought cops cannot save you." Voss stared at the flash drive. He stared at the 16-year-old girl holding it. And in his eyes, Wren saw the moment he understood that he was finished. Not because of the bikers, not because of the guns, but because a girl he had dismissed as a loose end had outmaneuvered him at every turn. Flint zip-tied Voss's hands behind his back and hauled him to his feet. The nomads were already loading the unconscious mercenaries into the back of the Escalades, stripping them of weapons, securing their restraints. "Mount up," Gunnar ordered. "We leave the trash for the garbage men." Wren pulled out her phone and dialed a number she had found through the hospital's internet connection that afternoon. The Portland FBI field office's 24-hour tip line. "This is Ren Calloway," she said when the line picked up. "I have information regarding a federal money laundering operation run by a man named Nolan Voss. I have a flash drive containing 4 years of payment records, bank routing numbers, and a list of compromised law enforcement officers in 3 states. I also have Nolan Voss himself, along with 6 of his private military contractors, restrained at the old sawmill off Route 4 in Coppervale, Oregon. I would suggest you send a team, quickly." She gave them the coordinates, answered 3 questions, and hung up. The nomads vanished into the night on silent engines. The van disappeared down the back road. By the time Sheriff Haskell and the state police arrived at the sawmill, followed 30 minutes later by 2 black SUVs from the FBI's Portland office, the warehouse was empty of Iron Saints. All that remained were 6 zip-tied mercenaries lined up on their knees, a battered Harker still tied to his chair, and Nolan Voss sitting in the mud with a flash drive taped to his forehead with duct tape. Ren's idea. She thought it added a certain poetic symmetry. The drive back to the hospital was quiet. Ren sat in the van, her head leaning against the cold metal wall, her eyes closed. The adrenaline was draining out of her body like water from a cracked vessel, leaving behind an exhaustion so complete it felt like her bones were dissolving. Gunnar sat across from her. His shoulder had been field dressed by Flint, wrapped tight in gauze and medical tape. It would need stitches, but he had refused to go to the hospital until he was sure Ren was safe. "You were right," Gunnar said into the darkness of the van. His voice was barely audible above the engine. Ren opened her eyes. "About all of it," he continued. "Pruitt, Corbin, the plan, the river." He paused. "About Micah, about what he represents." Ren did not respond. She was too tired for words. "I have spent my whole life living by a code," Gunnar said. "Loyalty, strength, blood for blood. And I thought that was enough. I thought that was what made a man." He looked at his scarred knuckles, the tattoos that covered his arms, the leather cut that had defined his identity for 3 decades. But that kid in the hospital, he never lived by any code. He never swore any oath. He just saw someone in trouble and stood up. No backup, no army, no plan. Just him and a dish rag and more guts than any man I have ever known. He looked at Ren. His eyes were wet. "You asked me to be the man you used to believe in. I do not know if I am that man, Ren, but I am going to try." Ren reached across the van and took her father's hand. His fingers were rough, scarred, calloused from decades of gripping handlebars and making fists. She held them gently. "That is all I ever wanted," she said. They rode the rest of the way in silence. Father and daughter, the storm and the mountain, connected by something stronger than blood, stronger than code, connected by the choice to be better. Micah Dawson opened his eyes on a Friday morning. The first thing he saw was the ceiling. White acoustic tiles, each one dotted with tiny holes lit by a fluorescent panel that cast a flat antiseptic glow. The second thing he noticed was the beeping, a steady rhythmic pulse that seemed to be coming from somewhere to his left. The third thing was the pain, a deep, hot line of fire that ran along his left side from his ribs to his hip, pulsing with every heartbeat. He tried to move. His body rebelled instantly, the pain flaring so sharply that he gasped and went rigid. "Easy," a voice, soft, urgent, familiar in a way he could not immediately place. "Do not try to move. You have got about 40 stitches and a missing spleen. The doctor said you are supposed to lie still for at least another week." Micah blinked. He turned his head slowly, carefully, and saw her. Ren was sitting on the wide windowsill, one knee pulled to her chest. She looked different from the girl who had walked into the diner 4 nights ago. The oversized leather jacket laundered by one of the nurses, but still carrying a faint shadow of rust brown that no amount of detergent could fully erase, was draped over a chair. She wore a gray hoodie instead, soft and worn. Her face was clean, her short hair pulled back, and her eyes, those storm cloud blue eyes, were fixed on him with an intensity that made the room feel very small. "You are okay," Micah said. It was not a question. It was the first thing his brain produced, the thought that had been frozen in place since the moment the world went dark on the diner floor. "Yes, Micah," Ren said. She smiled, and it was the first genuine, unguarded smile she had allowed herself in weeks. "I am okay. Because of you." "Did I win, Fly?" Micah asked. His voice was a dry crackle, and it hurt to speak, but the corner of his mouth turned up. Ren let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. You won. You held the line. And the cavalry came. They were gone, Micah. Harker, Voss, all of them. The FBI has them. It is over. Good, Micah whispered. His eyes drifted shut for a moment, the morphine pulling at him. That is good. Mom, another voice said, warm, breaking with emotion. Micah opened his eyes again. His mother was there. Della stood beside the bed, her hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She had not slept in 4 days, had barely eaten, had worn a path in the linoleum between the waiting room and the ICU. But in this moment, with her son's eyes open and focused, she looked like a woman who had just witnessed a resurrection. Hey, Mom, Micah said. Della collapsed forward, wrapping her arms around him as gently as she could, pressing her face into his shoulder, her body shaking with sobs that she had held back through days of terror and prayer. My boy, she whispered. My brave, stupid, wonderful boy. Micah winced at the pressure on his side, but did not complain. He held his mother with his free arm, the one that was not connected to an IV drip, and let her cry. After a while, the door to the room opened. The air shifted the way it always did when Gunnar Calloway entered a space. Not because he was loud, because he was a force and forces did not need to announce themselves. He was not wearing his cut today. He wore a dark t-shirt that strained across his broad chest and heavy denim jeans. His left arm was in a sling, the shoulder wound bandaged beneath the fabric. But he could not hide what he was. He filled the doorway like a wall. His beard was the color of iron filings. His arms were mapped with ink that told decades of stories. He carried a motorcycle helmet in one hand and held a small paper bag in the other. Micah's eyes widened as he took in the man. He had never seen anyone like this in Coppervale. This man looked like something the wilderness had carved out of granite and sent to deliver a message. You are him, Micah rasped. The dad. I am, Gunnar said. His voice was quiet, almost reverent, as if he were entering a church. He walked to the bedside, his boots making barely a sound on the floor. He looked down at Micah and saw the bandages, the tubes, the fragility of a 17-year-old kid who worked at a diner. Gunnar had led men into conflicts for 20 years. He had seen hard men, enforcers, soldiers, but he had never seen anything like this boy. This kid was not tough the way Gunnar's world defined tough. He was something rarer, something better. Gunnar extended a hand. It was massive, engulfing Micah's completely. But he did not squeeze. He held the boy's hand with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a man that size. You saved my world, son, Gunnar said. His voice was thick with an emotion he had spent a lifetime suppressing. There are not words for that. There is not enough money in the world to pay for that. You gave me back my daughter. Micah looked at the big man, feeling the calluses on his palm. I just could not let them take her, he murmured. He had a knife. She was scared. It was not right. No, Gunnar agreed. It was not right, and most men would have run. Most men would have hid. You stood up. He released Micah's hand and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a set of car keys and placed them on the bedside table. My boys went by your house, Gunnar said. We saw the Taurus in the driveway. Transmission was shot. Head gasket was blown. Micah winced. Yeah, I was saving up. It is fixed, Gunnar said. New transmission, new engine, new paint. We even fixed the AC. It runs better than the day it rolled off the lot. Micah stared at him. Then Gunnar reached into his other pocket and pulled out a second set of keys. Heavier. The key fob bore the silver shield of Harley-Davidson. I figured a young man who stared down a knife deserves something with a little more soul for when he heals up, Gunnar said. Something that understands the wind. He placed the motorcycle keys in Micah's hand. There is a 2024 Iron 883 Sportster in your garage. Matte black, custom exhaust, paid in full, insurance and registration handled. Micah looked at the keys in his palm. His throat was tight. His eyes were burning. I cannot accept this, he whispered. You are not accepting a gift, Micah. Gunnar said, his tone shifting from warm to solemn. You are accepting a tribute. He looked at Della, who was watching from the other side of the bed, her eyes wide with disbelief. We set up a trust in your name this morning, Gunnar said. Full ride, tuition, books, housing, engineering school, medical school, whatever you choose. The Iron Saints are picking up the tab. Della covered her mouth. A sound escaped her that was somewhere between a gasp and a prayer. Mr. Calloway, you do not have to. I do, Gunnar said, cutting her off gently. He bled for my family, Mrs. Dawson. My family will sweat for his. That is the code. He turned back to Micah. You are family now, kid. You understand you have brothers in every state. You ever have trouble, you ever feel unsafe, you make one call and we answer. Micah looked at his mother. She was radiant, her exhaustion and grief transformed into a pride so fierce it seemed to fill the room with light. He looked at Wren, who was watching from the windowsill with a smile that reached her eyes for the first time since they had met. For the first time in his life, Micah Dawson, the invisible boy from Coppervale, the background character in his own town, felt seen. He felt valued. He felt like he mattered. Thank you, Micah whispered. Gunnar stepped back. He gave the boy a sharp, respectful nod. The kind of commanding officer gives a soldier who has proved himself under fire. No, Gunnar said. Thank you. He turned and walked toward the door. He paused in the frame, looked back at Wren, and something passed between them. A question asked and answered without words. Then he walked out, his boots heavy on the linoleum, leaving the door open behind him. Wren sat with Micah for a while after Gunnar left. Della had gone to call her sister to share the good news, to cry happy tears into a phone in the hallway. The room was quiet except for the beep of the monitor and the distant rumble of 200 engines beginning to stir in the parking lot below. They are leaving, Micah asked, looking toward the window. Yeah, Wren said, back to the road, back to their lives. And you? The question hung in the air. Wren looked at the window, at the sea of chrome and leather assembling in formation below. She could see her father's Road King gleaming black in the autumn sun, waiting at the head of the column. She could go with them. She could ride home, back to Reno, back to the clubhouse, back to the life she had been born into. Her father would welcome her. The club would celebrate. She would be the president's daughter again, shielded, protected, untouchable. Or she could choose something else. I am not going with them, Wren said quietly. Micah looked at her. I am going to stay here for a while. Help your mom while you recover. Get my feet under me. She paused. I am going to enroll in school, finish my diploma, apply to college. College, Micah blinked. For what? Law, Wren said. And the word felt right in her mouth, solid and true, like a key turning in a lock. I spent my whole life watching people solve problems with fists and money and fear. I want to learn how to solve them with words, with evidence, with the law. She looked at him, and there was something luminous in her expression, a clarity that came from a decision made not in desperation, but in conviction. You changed something, Micah. You did not throw a punch. You did not pull a weapon. You stood in front of a girl with a dish rag and said no. And that was enough. That was more powerful than 200 motorcycles. I want to spend the rest of my life being that kind of powerful. Micah was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. A real smile, the first one, since before the diner, wide enough to crease his pale cheeks and make the pain in his side feel very far away. Law school, he said. That is going to make your dad's head explode. Wren laughed, a real laugh, sudden and bright and surprised, the laugh of a girl who had forgotten she was capable of it. He will survive, she said. He is tough. From the hallway, a knock. Soft. Wren went to the door. Flint was standing there holding a black leather vest. He handed it to Wren without a word and walked away. She brought it back to the bed. She held it up so Micah could see. It was not a full member's cut. It was high-quality leather, clean and new, without the patches and rockers that marked a patch member. But on the left breast, a single patch was stitched in white thread against the black leather, protected by the Iron Saints. My dad left this for you, Wren said. She draped it over the back of the chair beside Micah's bed. Wear that and nobody anywhere will ever touch you again. From the parking lot below, the sound began to rise. It started as a low rumble, like the first tremor of an earthquake, vibrating through the walls and the floor and the glass. Then it grew, building in layers, engine after engine joining the chorus, until the sound was a living, breathing force that shook the pictures on the walls and made the water in the pitcher on Micah's bedside table tremble. 200 engines roared to life in unison. Wren walked to the window and looked down. The formation was perfect. 3 abreast, stretching back through the parking lot and onto the street, a river of black and chrome flowing toward the highway. At the head, Gunner's Road King rumbled with a deep, unmistakable authority. She placed her hand against the glass. She could feel the vibration through her palm, through her bones. A gunner did not look up. He did not wave. He simply kicked his bike into gear, and the column moved. 200 machines rolling in perfect formation, their pipes singing a song that the town of Coppervale would talk about for generations. They rolled down Elm Street, past the hospital, past the diner that was still closed behind yellow police tape, past the hardware store and the barbershop and the church. They turned onto Route 9 and headed for the highway, the sound of their engines fading slowly like thunder, rolling away after a storm. Wren watched until the last tail light disappeared beyond the ridge. Then she turned back to the room. Micah was watching her. His eyes were heavy with morphine, but they were warm. "You really are not going," he said. "No," Wren said. She sat back down on the windowsill and pulled her knee to her chest. "I am done running, Micah. I am done hiding. I am done being someone else's story." She looked out the window at the empty road, at the quiet town settling back into its ordinary rhythm, at the Poema October sun, climbing above the ridge and spilling golden light across the valley. "This is where I start my own," she said. The legend of Coppervale spread the way all great stories do. In whispers at first, then in louder voices, then in the kind of full-throated telling that happens in diners and barbershops, and around campfires when the night is long and the audience is willing. They told the story of the boy who stood between a girl and a knife with nothing but a dish rag and his own 2 feet. They told the story of the girl who called an army but commanded it with her conscience. They told the story of the father who knelt before a cleaning lady and chose the law over the river. And they told the story of the night that 200 engines shook a town awake and reminded it what thunder sounds like when it comes to answer courage. Micah Dawson made a full recovery. He graduated from high school, enrolled in engineering school on the Iron Saints scholarship, and eventually opened his own restoration shop in Portland, specializing in classic American muscle cars and vintage motorcycles. The matte black Iron 883 Sportster sat in the front window of his shop for years, polished and gleaming, a reminder that he never needed to explain to anyone. Wren Calloway finished high school in Coppervale. She graduated valedictorian. She went to college, then law school. She passed the bar on her first attempt. She never wore the leather again, but she kept a photograph of her father in her office next to a framed menu from Pop's Diner. Detective Corbin was among the 19 law enforcement officers indicted in the federal sweep that followed the Voss case. He pleaded guilty to 12 counts of public corruption and was sentenced to 14 years in a federal penitentiary. He never set foot in Coppervale again. They remained close friends for the rest of their lives, bonded by a Tuesday night in October when the world revealed itself in the starkest possible terms. Good and evil, courage and cowardice, the choice to stand or the choice to look away. The story of Coppervale reminds us of something important. It reminds us that heroes do not always wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes they wear greasy aprons and drive broken-down sedans. Sometimes they are 16-year-old girls who choose the law over the fist, the courtroom over the river, the hard right over the easy wrong. It teaches us that true bravery is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to stand your ground when every nerve in your body is screaming at you to run. And most of all, it reminds us that loyalty, real loyalty, the kind that bleeds and bruises and holds the line, is a currency more valuable than all the gold in the world. If you enjoyed this story of courage, justice, and the roar of the open road, hit that like button. It helps the channel grow and lets us know you want more stories like this. Do not forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. And tell me in the comments, would you have stood your ground, like Micah, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that good people still exist?